Welcome back to The Person Everyone Needs. I am your host, Webb Hoggard, and I am thrilled to talk to you today on the subject of why I'm doing this podcast. Recently, my family has made a move. We are moved closer to where our jobs are. My wife is the principal over a school, and I'm pastoring a church. And we were living about 30 minutes from there, but we wanted to move closer to where our hearts are. So we are so excited to make that move. I think anytime you get to move closer to where your heart is, the better you are. So that being a job that helps you get to the things that you're passionate about, whether it's getting closer to family, which we were able to do as well. We moved close to my parents and my wife's parents, and my grandmother is still living, and she's living about 2 miles down the road from us. And so in a lot of ways, not only are we moving to where our hearts are, but we're also moving to where we'll have even more support and even more space. We were living downtown in a town that was beautiful and wonderful, but this country boy was missing open spaces. And so why am I telling you these things? What does that got to do with you? Well, during the midst of this, I've noticed that it would have been really easy, and in fact, it was very easy to get distracted and discouraged in the midst of pursuing something that I know is good for me, good for my family, good for the ministry that we've, like long term, this is going to be great stuff, but in the meantime, it's really difficult. And so in this season, I've been thinking on a lot of what to cut out of my life or what to make sure that I'm focusing on that gets my attention. And I was reminded again of the reason I started this podcast, and the reason I think this podcast is very important is there's a lot of things that I want to say to my sons that either they're not interested or they're not ready to hear yet. And so one of the things that I thought in the midst of what I'm dealing with here is, yes, I want you to pursue your dreams. In fact, that might be next week. I might talk about the constant pursuit of what is better. But even more than that, make sure that you are positioning yourself to be in the place that matters most. You can't be who you want to be in your next chapter if you're not who you need to be in this one. The only way to hit the mark, the only way the archer hits the mark is partly by pulling back and partly by letting go. So there's some things in your life from time to time that you're going to need to pull back on. Look, there's going to be some moments that you need to create a budget for yourself, and you need to stick to that budget. There's going to be seasons of your life that you need to create a diet for yourself. This is not going to revolutionize your mind at all, but look, there's two ways of making money. One is by going to work and earning it. The other one is by stopping spending, by saving it. That's the two ways of increasing your money. And so some of you out there, you're go-getters, you're giving it everything you got. You picked up a second job, you're working extra hours and all that because you're trying to earn more. That's wonderful. That's a great thing. Look, ambition is of God. God is an ambitious God. He does not want us to sit around in our level of contentment, that we do not expand and grow. The first chapter in the Bible, it tells us that God commands us to be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, move forward, be passionate, be ambitious, reproduce yourself. So ambition's huge. But the other part is, if you can't find joy in the midst of the pursuit, even, I'm not talking about like a short term, I'm talking about long term, but if you can't find the joy, if you can't find your peace, then you need to make sure that you're creating a life where you can sustain the spiritual fruit that matters most. And so today, I want to talk about sacrifices that are not really sacrifices at all, because they move you to where you really want to be. I have spent the last 3 months discussing with lenders and lawyers and buyers and getting our house ready. My wife has constantly been getting our house ready in order to sell, and so our life has been in flux. You know, how much do we buy? How much Sam's Club do we go ahead and get because we might be moving, and who wants to move that stuff? And how much furniture do we really have and need? And our life has been in flux. So we've been abundantly blessed. We are a blessed family, and we've seen how blessed we are in these days. But these decisions were chaotic. But I was reminded in the middle of this of a comment that Warren Buffett once said. Warren Buffett said he has never owned anything that didn't cost him too much. And I think that that's something that helped me be encouraged. Like, this is where I want to be. That's what I had to keep telling myself mentally. Webb, I know it's tough right now. I know you're ready to give up. I know it's harder. It doesn't seem like it's worth it. Your peace is gone. Your joy is gone. And it's difficult. And I don't mean my ultimate peace. I know where my peace is in Jesus and all that. I'm just talking about in the few weeks of anxiety-ridden days, I had to remind myself over again that the reason I'm going through what I'm going through is because it's not really a sacrifice if ultimately I get what I want. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, giving up something is hard, but giving up something difficult to get something better is not really sacrifice. It's called investment. And so if I was talking to my sons later on in their life, or if they're listening to this during a difficult time in their life, I want you to know that just because it's a difficult season doesn't mean God's not in it. That's one thing we run to immediately is we think, well, if it's too difficult, then obviously God's not in it. No, God doesn't make things easy. He gives us grace to endure. Yes, and grace feels like oil. It sometimes makes the gears that want to grind, it makes them run smoother. I understand that. But just because something's difficult does not mean that God's not in it. In fact, it might mean that the devil is moving against you because he knows what freedom, what joy, what you're trying to get to. So I would say to you today, if it's something that you really want, it's not a sacrifice. If you have to give up something you like to get something better, it's called an investment. Andy Stanley once said that. Warren Buffett's quote of "I overpaid for everything I've ever wanted" was a huge encouragement to me. And knowing mental health and knowing the fact that I'm still pastoring people in the midst of these difficult moments, it's not like my emotional health or even my spiritual health can just be put on the back burner completely. And so what I caught myself doing is something I want to share with you today. So if you checked out on me, check back in. Here we go. I told myself every time I would get discouraged, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be. That may sound so simple to you, but for me, it was a way of reconfiguring my brain every time I got discouraged. Every time I was ready to quit, every time I wanted to stop, every time I was ready to call and hang it up, every time I was ready to yell at the person that was making things difficult or tell my wife I was ready to quit or whatever it was I was at, or the moments that my patience was so thin that I started getting angry at my sons for no reason. Knew it wasn't their fault, but I started getting frustrated because things weren't going my way, blah, 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 blah. It's life. I understand that. But I would say to myself in those moments, and it was something that would help my mental health stay strong in the midst of a pretty difficult and frustrating season, I would tell myself, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. This is my choice. This is my life, and this is what I want. Instead of thinking to myself, I'm a victim to all the things that were happening to us, and a lot of it did happen to us. It wasn't a whole lot of stuff that we were asking for ourselves other than wanting to move. The difficulties constantly kept coming up, and every time a difficult moment would come, I'd say, this is what I want. I encourage you to know the dreams of your life and pursue them with such passion that on the difficult days when everybody else would have quit, when everybody else is telling you to throw in the towel, you can look at them and say, but this is what I want. People know me, know that I'm a little squeamish around hospitals. I don't do very good with extremely emotional situations. And I've even been told, why did you get into ministry if you don't like hospitals? Which I didn't know. When I was called to preach, I didn't know that I'd had to go to hospitals. But the truth is, the reason hospitals bother me is because I have a pretty high level of empathy. I really care about people, and when I see they're sick or hurting, it really breaks my heart. And so in the moments that I have to enter a difficult situation, I pray. I say it once again to myself, this is where I want to be. When I have to go have a conversation that is uncomfortable because people are sometimes difficult to handle, I remind myself, this is where I want to be. When a young person is going through a terrible situation and they desperately need someone to stand in the gap with them, and I go and I don't even know what to say. I don't have the wisdom for them. I can't fix their problem. When I sit down with that person, that kid, I say to myself, this is where I want to be. On the Sundays when it would be easier for me to sit down instead of stand up and preach, or when it's easier not to go to prayer meeting or to plan or go to the staff meetings or to call the people, I remind myself this is where I want to be. When my sons need their dad and I'm exhausted and I want moments to myself, I remind myself this is where I want to be, because deep down, I know that if I'm not in this moment, it's the only time I get to live this moment. I'm going to say it again. If I'm not in this moment, it'll be the only time I ever get to live this moment. My boys are 11, 7, and 6 right now, and it won't be long, and they won't be anymore. So I can keep telling them, hey, wait, Dad's going to get it together. Webb's going to get better. But at some point, I've got to say, this is where I want to be. This moment is where I want to be. These people are who I want to be with. Yes, I have my aims and my dreams on something greater at all times, but the only way I'm going to enjoy the moment I'm in is to be reminded, this is the life I chose. This is the life I want. This is where I want to be. Because being present is one of the most important things you can be. And I know this to be the case. People who are present, those are the people that everyone needs.